The encrypted message arrived at about 0400 hours, cutting through the usual background noise of the DARPA research facility like a knife. Most of the night staff would have missed it entirely, but not Kyle Myers. His fingers danced across multiple holographic displays, parsing the signal's complex harmonics with a precision that bordered on obsessive.
Ethan, he muttered into his comm unit, you're going to want to see this.
50 miles away, Ethan Myers was midway through his third cup of black coffee, reviewing training simulations for an upcoming Marine Corps Advanced Tactics workshop. He recognized the tone in Kyle's voice. Not panic, but something far more dangerous. Intrigue. "Talk to me," Ethan responded, already reaching for his tactical gear. The next 20 minutes were a blur of encrypted communications, rapid authentication protocols, and a growing sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. When the preliminary analysis came through, even Ethan's battle-hardened composure cracked slightly. The signal wasn't just a message. It was a formal diplomatic communication from something decidedly not human. Kyle's holographic display flickered with a language that defied even the most advanced AI translation matrices, though admittedly those are still in their infancy. Geometric patterns shifted and realigned, creating linguistic structures that seemed to breathe with an almost organic complexity.
It's a request,
Kyle said, his voice tight with concentration.
but not like any diplomatic communication we've ever seen.
Ethan leaned closer, his Marine Corps training warring with pure scientific curiosity. The symbols weren't just a language. They were a multi-dimensional communication matrix that seemed to fold in on itself, revealing layers of meaning with each algorithmic pass. "They want training," Ethan finally said, comprehension dawning. "Specific types of training." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in governmental secrecy. Top-level clearance meetings, rapid response protocols, and a level of excitement that vibrated just beneath the surface of official calm. The Joint Chiefs, typically a group not easily impressed, were simultaneously fascinated and deeply concerned.
A civilization capable of interstellar communication is requesting human military training,
General Richard said, his weathered face a map of skepticism and grudging respect. "Specifically, they want our combat instructors," Ethan clarified. Both he and Kyle sat across from the general, an unlikely pair. Ethan, all coiled muscle and tactical precision, represented decades of refined combat experience. Kyle, with his MIT engineered brilliance, brought technological innovation that redefined modern warfare.
They've studied us,
Kyle explained, bringing up holographic representations of the aliens' communication.
not just our military history, but our entire approach to conflict resolution. They're particularly interested in how humans transform tactical challenges into strategic opportunities.
The geometric language continued to shift, revealing nested layers of meaning. It was less a traditional communication and more a living, breathing, intellectual proposal. General Richards cleared his throat.
And what will they give in return?
The question hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. Kyle's fingers danced across the display, revealing another layer of communication.
Technology exchange for us. Things beyond our wildest dreams that could catapult humanity into space. Cultural understanding for them. Though primarily, they want to understand the human approach to training, strategy, and conflict resolution.
Ethan's mind was already several steps ahead. He'd seen enough global conflicts, enough asymmetrical warfare, to understand that this was more than just a simple request. This was a comprehensive evaluation of human potential. They didn't just want to learn human tactics to improve themselves. They saw humanity as a threat, and were here to turn that threat into an asset instead. Declining meant that there remained only one way to eliminate the potential threat. "They've been watching us," Ethan said quietly. "Not just our military, our entire species." The implications were staggering. A civilization advanced enough for interstellar communication had chosen humans as their model for combat training, not the Scandinavian Special Forces, not the Israeli Mossad. Humans, all of us.
We'll need a comprehensive preparation protocol,
Kyle said, already designing preliminary training scenarios in his mind. Adaptive software that could translate actively progressing combat simulations and human tactical thinking into a format comprehensible to even an alien civilization. Ethan nodded. And we'll need to prepare for anything. The first official communication arrived 3 days later, though not through traditional diplomatic channels, but rather directly to their secure facility. A crystalline structure materialized in the central research chamber, defying known laws of physics, projecting a communication matrix that was equal parts mathematical precision and artistic complexity. Representatives will arrive in precisely 72 hours. Human civilization was about to have its first official extraterrestrial training consultation, and they had no idea what was coming. The crystalline structure continued to pulse, its geometric patterns a silent promise of revelations yet to come. Somewhere in its complex matrix lay the first steps of humanity's introduction to a much larger, more complex universe. It was immediately sent to a joint UN research team and served as upfront payment for the technological exchange. Ethan Myers and Kyle Myers stood at the precipice of first contact, and they were ready. The arrival of the alien delegation defied every expectation humanity had ever constructed about first contact. They didn't descend from the sky in massive motherships. They didn't broadcast overwhelming technological superiority. Instead, they simply appeared. 5 beings of varying physiological configurations that looked like they had stepped out of the most advanced special forces training simulation imaginable. Kyle's initial scans revealed technology so advanced they made current human military equipment look like children's toys. Yet there was something distinctly practical about their presence. No theatrical displays of power, no intimidating postures, just pure, calculated efficiency. The lead representative, a being that Kyle's preliminary analysis suggested was a hybrid of organic and technological components, stepped forward. Its communication interface was a complex neural network that translated thoughts into a form of language comprehensible to humans. "We are the Concordants," the being stated, its vocalization a perfect blend of mechanical precision and organic resonance. "We have traveled exactly 407.2 light years to understand human training methodologies." Ethan's multidisciplined training and years of veteran experience kicked in immediately. Years of handling high-stress diplomatic and combat scenarios had prepared him for moments of extreme unpredictability, though admittedly, first contact did push at the edges of possibility. He recognized something in their approach, a respect that went beyond simple curiosity. "Hello, I'm Ethan Myers, and this is my partner Kyle Myers. Humanity has, after much deliberation, chosen us as our team to represent the planet in this exchange. Welcome to Earth." He performed a light bow, knowing that these aliens who had studied human culture would know what it means, and stepped back to allow Kyle to take the lead in guiding their guests to the observation room. The facility they had prepared was a marvel of human engineering. Multiple training zones designed to test physical, mental, and strategic capabilities. Holographic simulation chambers, adaptive environment generators, everything Kyle and his team developed over years of military research, hastily refitted for inhuman trainees. "Your species has a unique approach to conflict resolution," a different Concordance representative spoke, electing to stand before the one-way window rather than attempt to seat itself at an alien chair. Unlike the lead representative, this one was entirely biological, but didn't really look it. Its skin shined like steel, and its limbs bristled with overbuilt muscle groups straight out of an anime. It continued. "Most civilizations we've encountered rely on either pure technological superiority to overwhelm, or rigid hierarchical training models to coordinate further overwhelming numbers. But humans demonstrate something different, which we struggle to understand through mere passive observation. The first simulation was deceptively simple. On its surface, it was a clearing of all enemies out of a tall building. But in truth, it is a dangerous and complex tactical scenario that requires not just physical prowess, but adaptive thinking. The simulation would present a multi layered combat environment where traditional military doctrine would fail spectacularly. Ethan stepped into the holographic chamber, Kyle monitoring every biometric and strategic variable from the control room. The scenario materialized around him, a complex urban environment, multiple threat vectors, limited resources. The kind of scenario that would break most linear tactical thinking. Ethan is alone, distinctly so against several dozen enemies. There are no clear lines of battle to draw on. His weapons and armor are only barely a cut above his enemies. This is about as disadvantageous as it gets for winnable scenarios. The Concordants simply wanted to learn more about human fighting techniques. What they didn't realize was that their initial communication had chosen Earth's most dangerous operative to demonstrate adaptive warfare. Ethan moved with a fluidity that seemed to defy intuition and traditional combat training. He wasn't just responding to threats as they appeared, he was anticipating them, predicting them, creating tactical vulnerabilities for foes that might not even be in the next room or hallway. He was leaving traps, breaking parts of the environment to create new passages, most of which he'll never use, as they're only there for potential scenarios and to confound any trailing opposition. Kyle's real-time analysis was enough to elicit reactions of shock, even from the otherwise stoic aliens of the Concordance. Ethan wasn't just solving the tactical problem, he was rewriting the problem entirely. Now it wasn't him solving a tactical problem, it was his simulated enemies that had to solve him. Observe, Kyle explained to the Concordance representatives.
What humans call thinking outside the box is not just a metaphorical concept, it's its own entire approach.
The simulation continued. Most military training systems would have registered multiple mission failure points, conditions under which winning was impossible. But Ethan was creating success from what should have been impossible scenarios. Rooms filled with targets lying in wait, aware of their foe that no normal person would have ever hoped to beat in a firefight. Defeated by Ethan, by himself, with nothing more than what few resources he had at his disposal and the environment around him. 3 hours into the simulation, the Concordance representatives were no longer observing. They were studying. Your training methodologies. One of them, this one seemingly to be entirely machine, stated, do not follow any recognizable strategic doctrine. Even with the analysis, I see no consistent logic. At some points, he makes one decision, and at other nearly identical points, he makes an entirely different one. I do not understand what logic drives him. Kyle smiled.
Isn't that exactly why you wanted us?
The next phase involved technological integration. The Concordance had brought what they considered their most advanced training technologies: adaptive neural interfaces, predictive combat algorithms, simulation generators that could model millions of potential conflict scenarios in milliseconds. Kyle was in his element, adapting these systems to his own custom-tailored ones and giving them to Ethan to utterly destroy.
What you're seeing,
He explained to them, interfacing with their systems.
is not just about defeating an enemy. It's about understanding the entire systemic context of conflict.
The technological exchange was less about hardware and more about philosophical approach. Humans didn't just train to win, they trained to understand. Ethan's background as a special operations instructor became increasingly relevant. His experience wasn't just about creating soldiers, it was about creating adaptive thinking warriors who could make complex decisions under extreme stress at high speeds. The Concordance had expected a linear knowledge transfer, What they were experiencing was something far more profound. By the end of the first week, the initial assessment was complete, but it was clear that this was just the beginning of a far deeper relationship between humanity and their newest benefactors, though at times it seemed as though it was humanity who were the benefactors. We require more, the lead representative stated, not as a demand, but as recognition. Kyle and Ethan exchanged a look, the look of two professionals who knew they were part of something historic, of the men who took the first true steps towards humanity's future. The transient vessel broke through the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, a planet that was designated as the Galactic Neutral Ground, designed specifically for use as an interstellar training and diplomatic hub. It was the one place where conflicting species could meet without immediate threat of warfare. Ethan gripped the edge of his seat, his muscles tense despite years of combat experience. Beside him, Kyle Bennett ran another diagnostic on their equipment, fingers of one hand dancing across holographic interfaces with practiced precision, and the other resting atop Ethan's arm. 63 different species, Kyle muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. 63 different physiological and cognitive structures, all converging in one place to learn what we can teach them. The facility was a marvel of engineering, constructed with a massive geological formation which broke every architectural principle Kyle knew of. It spread across multiple environmental zones. Each training area could be swiftly reconfigured to match the specific environmental needs of any species present. As they disembarked, the first thing that struck them was the diversity. Beings that would have been considered impossible on Earth moved, communicated, and prepared for training with a shared sense of purpose. Crystalline entities that communicated through light pulses, gaseous beings contained in specialized environmental suits, silicon-based life forms that processed information at speeds that would make quantum computers look primitive. Welcome, Earth instructors, a universal translator announced as they entered the central processing area. The voice was neutral, without emotion, and designed to be comprehensible to multiple sensory inputs. Their reputation had preceded them. The initial training session at the Concordance had spread through galactic communication networks like wildfire. Humans weren't just a 64th species to be categorized. They were the advent of a new dawn in warfare and, potentially, other areas as well. Kyle was already interfacing with the facility's adaptive training systems. His modifications transformed the standard training protocols, introducing unpredictability and forcing participants to think beyond their inherent biological limitations. The first challenge was multi-layered. Much like the one Ethan went through, it tested more than just physical capability. Participants would have to be adaptive and strong in their thinking and make the absolute utter maximum use of every resource at their disposal. The scenario materialized around them, this time literally instead of holographically like on Earth. A complex conflict simulation that merged technological, biological, and strategic elements from multiple civilizations. It was a comprehensive test of problem-solving, communication, and interspecies cooperation. Multiple different environments all in one. Some urban, some natural, some a strange blend of alien architectures that even Ethan had to take some time to understand the layout of. They want to see how we approach complex problems, Ethan observed, watching the initial participant group struggle to deal with even the opening moves of their scenarios. But our strength isn't in following rules or conventions. It's breaking them. The first training group consisted of 8 different species. The Krell, a silicon-based race known for their computational precision. The Etherian gas beings, who could reshape their molecular structure at will. The Zintar, insectoid creatures with a hive mind approach to conflict. And 5 others, each with their own unique physiological and strategic approaches. The simulation began. Traditional scenarios would have rapidly devolved into competitive chaos. Each species would typically attempt to demonstrate individual superiority, trying to exploit their unique strengths at the expense of all else, even their allies. This, however, would only ever create fractured, ineffective team dynamics. They might be able to use their strengths individually, but compared to what they could do using them together is an utter waste. What Kyle and Ethan had designed was specifically intended to show them that, to provide a brick wall that they could never ever beat unless they achieved maximum usage of resources, which absolutely required working as a team.
Communication is the primary weapon.
Kyle explained to the initial group. The translation systems worked overtime, converting his words into multiple sensory and cognitive formats.
Your individual capabilities mean nothing if you cannot understand each other.
Ethan demonstrated, not through words, but through action. The first scenario was a complex rescue mission in a multi-environmental disaster zone. Traditionally, each member of the species would act more or less independently, using their species' unique capabilities to their fullest. But before Ethan joined them, it never worked. They always lost far too many and often ended up becoming victims themselves. But Ethan showed them the way, showed them how their unique capabilities could be used together to do far more than they ever could alone. Showed them how to rewrite the problem, making it no longer about simply eliminating hazards, but saving lives. The Krell's computational abilities, the Etherian's molecular adaptability, the Xintar's collective strategic processing. Each strength became a part of a larger, more complex solution. The Xintar could identify unique tools or structures that would be useful in eliminating a threat, things they ordinarily would never have and thus information they would discard. The Krell would compute exactly how to produce these tools from local materials, and the Etherian would use their will to fabricate them with their body by taking in the environment itself. Together, there was no problem they could not solve in a matter of minutes, or even seconds. The other 5 participants had similar stories. Ethan and Kyle had ordered them to form teams specifically because of the unique cooperative options they had. By the 3rd day, word had spread. This wasn't just training. This was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies conflict resolution. Political tensions were rising in the galaxy. Multiple species were positioning themselves for potential confrontations, resource scarcity, territorial disputes. The traditional markers of potential galactic conflict were emerging. But here, in this training facility, none of that mattered. Kyle's adaptive technologies could translate not just language, but fundamental cognitive approaches. Ethan confronted the political complexities by demonstrating that cooperation wasn't just possible, but superior to traditional models of conflict. Their reputation grew, not through propaganda, not through technological superiority, but through a new approach to problem solving that challenged every existing galactic paradigm. By the end of the first training cycle, something remarkable had occurred. Species that had previously been on the brink of conflict were now exploring collaborative solutions, using their strengths together to solve problems they never could on their own. The final demonstration was a comprehensive scenario that combined every element of their training: environmental challenges, resource management, conflict resolution, strategic adaptation. As the simulation concluded, the representatives from every species stood in shocked silence. They hadn't just been trained, they had been transformed. The emergency transmission came 3 standard galactic cycles after their training session on Nexus Prime. It wasn't a request. It was a desperate plea. The Void Cascade, a theoretical threat that most galactic civilizations had dismissed as impossible, was no longer theoretical. Kyle's communication ray lit up with unprecedented data streams. Entire star systems were going dark, not destroyed, not conquered, simply erased, as if they had never existed.
This is beyond anything we've ever encountered,
Kyle muttered, his fingers flying across multiple holographic interfaces. Ethan watched, recognizing the look of a mind working at speeds most beings couldn't comprehend. He always loved watching him work. The Concordance representatives who had first sought human training now looked like frightened children. Their advanced technology suddenly seemed fragile, their sophisticated systems inadequate against a threat that they could barely even see, let alone understand.
We need a comprehensive approach,
Ethan said, his training now kicking into overdrive. Not a military solution, a systemic one. The Void Cascade wasn't a traditional enemy. It wasn't a species. It wasn't even a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a cascading quantum anomaly that consumed space-time itself, leaving nothing in its wake. Initial analysis showed a terrifying pattern. The anomaly didn't just destroy, it rewrote physical laws, erasing not just matter, but every potential for matter to exist.
It's literally consuming potential futures.
Kyle explained to the assembled Galactic Council.
Each system it touches doesn't just die. It's removed from the probability matrix of the universe.
12 different species sat in the emergency conference now, the other 51 all having vanished to the cascade. Species that had been on the brink of war with each other mere cycles ago now looked like a unified group of children facing an incomprehensible monster. The first attempt at a solution came from the Krull, with their computational precision, a mathematically perfect defensive algorithm that would have been impressive in any other context. It failed in less than 0.03 seconds when applied to the Void Cascade's expansion vector. The Etherian gas beings proposed a molecular reconfiguration strategy, advanced, elegant, completely useless. Ethan watched and listened. We're approaching this wrong, he said quietly. The translation systems worked overtime, converting his words into multiple cognitive formats. The entire council turned. You're looking at this as a problem to be solved, Ethan continued. It's not a problem. It's a system-seeking balance. Kyle's eyes widened. He recognized immediately what Ethan was getting at. The few species that remained saw the Void Cascade as a destructive force, a literal wall of death that obliterated all it touched. But what Ethan just proposed was that it was not a wall of destruction, but an act committed by the universe itself.
We need to understand its fundamental communication protocol,
Kyle said, building on Ethan's insight.
Not stop it, but redirect it.
The next 72 hours were a masterclass in interdisciplinary problem solving. Quantum physicists worked alongside evolutionary biologists. Computational experts collaborated with philosophers. Technological systems merged with abstract cognitive models. And at the center of it all were two humans who refused to see limitations. Kyle developed a communication matrix that could potentially interface with the Void Cascade's expansion. It wasn't about blocking. It was about negotiation. Ethan designed training scenarios that forced the participating species to think beyond their biological and technological limitations. They weren't preparing for a traditional defense. They were preparing to understand. The Void Cascade wasn't a threat. It was a message. The final breakthrough came not from advanced technology, but from an almost absurdly simple insight.
You were right, Ethan! It's communicating,
Kyle said, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and scientific excitement.
Not attacking, communicating.
The Void Cascade is a sentient system seeking equilibrium, consuming potential futures that represent systemic instability. Each erased star system was a form of complex mathematical correction, removing all potential for conflict and chaos, which coincidentally meant matter itself, as matter and energy are intrinsically chaotic. This was space-time trying to preserve itself from something that happened as a direct result of sapient conflict.
We need to show it another way,
he said quietly. The assembled Galactic Council looked broken. 12 different species, each with technological capabilities that would have seemed like magic to humans just decades earlier, now sat in absolute silence. Kyle's communication matrix began to take shape. Not a weapon, not a defense system, but a complex linguistic bridge that could potentially translate the few fluctuations of energy that the cascade emitted as it destroyed. The first attempt destroyed 3 research stations. Quantum feedback loops erupted, temporarily warping local spacetime in ways that defied conventional physics. The second attempt was more subtle. Instead of trying to interface directly with the Void Cascade, they would demonstrate an alternative method of systemic balance before it. Ethan designed the approach, not as a military strategist, but as someone who understood fundamentally conflict resolution. A communication would show how diverse systems could coexist, how potential conflicts could be resolved through adaptive cooperation rather than erasure, how not all permutations of matter and energy necessarily led to destruction and conflict. They would show the void cascade that diversity wasn't a threat, it was a strength. The transmission began. Mathematical patterns demonstrated cooperative problem solving. Quantum entanglement models showed how seemingly conflicting systems could achieve mutual stability. Evolutionary data showing how complexity emerged from collaborative interactions. For 3 standard galactic cycles, nothing happened. Then everything happened. The first sign was subtle. A star system that had already seen its outer planets erased simply paused. The void cascade's expansion hesitated. Then another. Then another. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as entire regions of space that had been considered lost suddenly stabilized.
It's not just communication,
Kyle said, his voice a mixture of scientific wonder and profound respect. The void cascade wasn't simply destroying, it was learning. Ethan recognized the process. It was exactly how he had trained diverse military units to work together, not by eliminating differences, but by finding common ground. By the 10th cycle, the void cascade had changed. No longer an expanding wall of obliteration, it became a complex systemic regulator, identifying potential conflict zones and creating pathways for resolution instead of erasure. Where resources would run out, new resources appeared. Where 2 species would be doomed to conflict over territory, suddenly new physical principles emerged that allowed them to share efficiently. The implications were staggering.
Humanity's greatest strength,
One of the Concordance representatives stated,
is not their military strategy. It is their ability to perceive systems of any kind, tactical or otherwise, as living, adaptive entities.
Political maneuverings that had defied galactic interactions for millennia suddenly seemed primitive. Species that had been on the brink of war now looked at each other with new understanding. Kyle created the communication bridge. Ethan's strategic thinking provided the philosophical framework. Humanity has not just solved a galactic threat, but demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to existence in general. As the final transmission concluded, the assembled species realized something profound. This was not an ending. This was a beginning. The galaxy would never be the same. And 2 humans from Earth had made all the difference.